Warm greetings, everybody. Thanks for joining this webinar on loss minimization on textile industry. We'll take 3 minutes for other participants to join. Thank you. For those who have joined just now, just we will start by 3:03. That's Dubai time, 4:03 Pakistan time. A very warm greetings to all our participants, and thanks for joining the webinar on risk management and loss prevention in textile industry. The focus of this particular webinar is from the eyes of loss adjusters and from the eyes of underwriters. What are the perspectives of the textile industry as a whole, and particularly in South Asia, the risks which we face, and the loss mitigation measures we should be undertaking to make the textile industry more vibrant. I just would like to start with an introductory message from Mohammad Isham. He is the president of Lahore Insurance Institute. Mr. Isham, can you join us for your inaugural address?
Thank you very much, Mr. Sri, and a very warm welcome to all the participants of today's webinar on risk management and loss prevention in textile sector, which is jointly organized by Regional Committee North of Insurance Association of Pakistan, Lahore Insurance Institute, and IGIP. I would like to thank Mr. Sri, who has always been very kind to host the webinar, and also our panel of speakers, the elite panel led by the most senior loss adjuster of Pakistan, Mr. George Lobo, and our two guest speakers from UAE, Miller International, Mr. Aston Picardo and Mr. Siri Mahesh, and our speaker, Mr. Faisal Khan from IGI Insurance Pakistan. Textile sector in South Asia has always played a pivotal role in the economy. India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh combined, they have exports of over 100 billion US dollars, and the domestic industry is almost about $200 billion. And we see that both in terms of starting from the production of cotton, the entire process of spinning industry is very well established in South Asia. And today's webinar will focus on the risk associated with it's a very high risk industry. And today we have the honor to have the panel which understands the textile risk inside out, and they'll be guiding us on what have they learned over the period of time, what are the best practices, and how losses can be mitigated, and how the risk can be managed more efficiently. So I would like to thank Mr. Zulfikar Ali Khan, who's the founder of IGIP, the group which comprises of professionals from over 30 countries now. It has swelled to about 300 professionals. And by virtue of that group today, we have this leverage to connect people from almost all continents and share the learnings that we have. So thank you very much, Mr. Chalapati, and it's over to you.
Hisham, it was a pleasure having your address. In fact, you are our moral booster. You have been very active in the market. And yesterday, when I was talking to Usman, he said, if it were not Hisham and Zulfikar, you would not have been in the industry. Usman, you remember your words. So Zulfikar and Hisham has been a great mentor and motivator in the Pakistan insurance industry, and it is our privilege to be associated with you both. Can I request Zulfikar to please address the webinar?
Good evening, everyone. I first of all thank to Chilapati, who always lead us for webinars, and I would like to thank Hisham Saab, who give ideas and motivate us to work on that. First, I need to give a brief introduction about the group. The group named International Group of Insurance Professionals, IGIP, was established at 2015, I guess, 2015, under the mentorship of great Muhammad Isa Khan Sahab, late. He was very well known in UAE market, in Saudi market, and in Pakistan and Bangladesh market. He was, you can say, the father of insurance in Pakistan. So we continue with his prophecy and focus and give time to the education and training and motivate people to know more about the insurance and risk management things. Today's topic, risk management and loss prevention in textile industry, is particularly important because the focus of production is in Pakistan, in India, in Bangladesh, is more than the focus we need to do on the risk management techniques. So today we will going to learn how we can mitigate risk, especially in this aspect. We have in our panel Mr. Siri Mahesh, Ashton, I forget some names even because don't know on the screen. George Saab and Faisal Khan, I guess, because I couldn't prepare last time for that thing. So I thank them all and I welcome them. And I must need to thank Chalapati to host and organize all this the show today. I thank everyone on behalf of the members too. So please continue with.
And Chalapati, just give me a minute to thank Mr. Usman Khalil, who has been organizing all this for us. And my apologies that I couldn't thank him earlier. And he is the one who has been taking all this pain of
Yes.
organizing things for us and doing these webinars seamlessly. So thank you, Usman, for all your support.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Usman and Zohaib Timur as well, sir. It's great work from Usman, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, in fact, thank you so much, Zulfikar. In fact, I had made 3 points just before I wanted to start my presentation. Is that first, we pray for Zulfikar's sister. She is suffering from cancer and she's undergoing treatment. And if Zulfikar is out of focus this time, otherwise he is the most lively person. It's because of the tension and trauma he is going through in the family. Zulfikar Saab, we are all with you, and we pray God
Thank
that
you, sir.
she will be fine. And
Thank you, sir, for your prayers. Thank you.
oh, it's our duty, sir, and we are with you. We are family. Uh, and I want to welcome the industry representatives. I understand we have some of the participants who are from the textile industry. I would like to give them a warm welcome and a special thanks for joining us on this webinar. And definitely, I want to thank both Usman and Zohaib because they have been the backbone, though they don't show their photographs also. But they are the people who are handling the whole thing technically and running the webinar so smooth in the last so many occasions. So let's get into the webinar directly. Thank you so much, everybody. And a warm welcome to those who have just now joined. I just wanted to start with this particular slide. When I was making the presentation in the morning and I was passing through my kitchen, I saw something like this at my home. My kitchen is quite big, but this is a scene. Definitely, our underwriters will see this and understand what sort of a risk my house is carrying. And this is a true story of every industry, and especially particularly the textile industry. Uh, Definitely, this will be more elaborated more by the four panelists who are basically with a surveyor background. The premises which we handle in any industry is big. There is no premises which I have seen in my career where the factories are small. That's why they are more congested or they're badly managed or badly stored. The problem is people don't handle risk properly. The same tissue box could have been kept elsewhere and we could have prevented one fire mishap. So this is the tragedy which we are talking about today. Though this is a kitchen situation, just we have to expand it a little bigger and it becomes a textile industry situation. I just wanted to give a brief of what is all fire about. Fire is basically made of three components, and Mr. Faisal in his upcoming presentation will be elaborating more on that. Basically, there should be a substance, there should be a fuel, and there should be a oxygen presence to give rise to fire. But the commodity on its own will not catch fire unless it attains a certain critical temperature, or there is a chemical reaction, or there is a strike to the insured material. So likewise, as long as there is heat, as long as there is fuel, and as long as oxygen is around, and as long as you have a commodity in place, the fire keeps on moving. And this is the most infamous fire triangle. That's how we in the industry we call it. Just a few glimpses of the textile industry I wanted to show in the pictures. So if you see, the first slide is about a good factory working, but the same factory, if we don't have the right type of loss minimization methods used, or we are not keeping a better housekeeping, this would be the situation. Likewise, we have looms and we have massive fires. The webinar basically here has a background to a recent fire claim which happened in Pakistan. And this fire claim had a massive impact on the economy. When I say economy, definitely it would be that the owner of the factory would have suffered a loss. But each factory, each industry supports the economy. If there is a loss in the country, the loss is to the country. This is how we see it. And very similar fires happened in Bangladesh as well in the last 3-4 years. Luckily, in the Pakistan case, we see that there were not much of loss of lives, though the property damage was extensive. It jolted the entire Pakistan textile industry, in fact. In Bangladesh case, we saw there is a major loss of life. In fact, a lot of women folk lost their lives because the industry is predominantly women oriented in where the textile manufacturing is reported. So what makes it so gullible? Definitely, I will stop my presentation here and I will take Mr. George. George is the industry veteran and a surveyor par excellence from Pakistan.
Thank you.
Just a minute, George. I will make a small introduction for you.
Okay,
And let me take the privilege of that.
sure.
Mr. George has been in the industry for the last 40 years. And yesterday was the first interaction I had with Mr. George. And I found George should be called George Jr. because George Sr. Was the pioneer in the industry and he has just carried forward what his dad was doing. So the loss adjusting is a family business for George. And what I understand from Isham and Usman is he has almost attended every big fire loss in the Pakistan. So I request George to take over and make his presentation.
Okay, thank you, Chala Patni. And I put my presentation up on the screen. Let me see. I'm afraid I cannot find my notes.
Yeah, so Mr. Lobo is there. It's we can see the slides. Yeah, it's
Yeah, Mr. Lobo, Usman will handle your presentation.
Okay.
You can stop sharing, I think. One, can you put up
Yes.
the slide?
Usman, can I
Mr. George,
look at-
you leave it. Usman is hosting from his side.
Okay.
Yeah, please.
Wait, George, sir.
Can you put it on slide mode if it's possible? Yeah, thank you. Please, Mr. George.
I was looking for my presentation.
It's on the screen. It's on the screen.
No, I don't see my Word file.
Sir, can you start from this?
Okay.
Slide?
It's been broken up.
It has been converted. Yes, yes.
Okay. Well, what I've said is that there have been huge advancements in production and various other aspects of textile, the whole industry, refinement in the industry. But sadly, safety and loss prevention measures have fallen behind. And every year we see fires, some large, some very large, almost the biggest in the world, and some small. To mitigate these losses is of a common interest to insurers, textile mill operators, and all people, stakeholders in the industry who contribute to different aspects of the industry. What has not kept pace with the growth is risk management. And risk management points out various shortcomings and flaws that exist in the industry. So the way to address that is to have periodic risk inspections by a surveyor experienced in the industry and point out various shortcomings that need to be addressed. Now, this starts all the way from ginning, when cotton is brought in from the field to be ginned. From ginning, and there are fires every year in the ginning industry, every single year. From ginning, you go to spinning, because the lint has to be spun. And there are fires in spinning. And there are fires in weaving. There are fires in every phase of the textile industry. And if you cannot eliminate them 100%, as in some countries, textile-oriented countries have almost no fires. But sadly, we do still have fires every year. Now, there are numerous means to mitigate those losses or to prevent them. And industry experts, the association, the Insurance Association, Fire Preventive Association, and everybody else, they meet sometimes. I would like to see more frequent meetings and exchange of ideas so that you come up with solutions. So risk inspections are the key to identifying the problem and the measures that should be taken with industry stakeholders, all industry stakeholders, including the textile mill people, to sit together and devise ways and means in which to reduce those losses or eliminate them. Now, if does anybody have a specific question, or will this come later? Hello, Zulfikar.
We will continue with
Yeah,
the presentation and we will have question answer session at the end, hopefully, sir.
Oh, at the end. Okay. All right. Would you like to continue?
yeah. Thank you so much, Mr. George. I think I should explain the format of our webinar. We would request participants to pick up their questions immediately after each panelist presentation. And we also have a 20 minutes question and answer session at the end of the panel discussion. If any of the participant has any question to Mr. George, we can always make it now. Usman, do we see any Q&A?
No questions yet, yeah, from the attendees, yeah.
I think let's continue with the next.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
So just to continue with what I was making as a presentation, I just wanted to touch upon a few highlights on fire hazards in the textile industry. We see fires coming up mainly from this following features. So fire is one cause. That definitely fire is the direct cause of a loss. Then lightning, explosion, implosion, impact damage, aerial damage or missile damage, earthquake which causes fire and shock, spontaneous combustion. Definitely, our loss adjusters will touch upon this more in elaboration when we talk about spontaneous combustion in textile industry. This is one of the major losses which we face in the market. Few markets have spontaneous combustion as a part of their standard cover, and few markets are still not very comfortable doing spontaneous combustion. Then we have molten metal spillage, which can cause direct fire, bush and forest fire, Reuten strike, which because we have volatile economies, there is a big chance of malicious activities. So the other feature which we should be more concerned about and the way we should be educating our clients is about insurable interest of the property. Because I see a few of the industry captains also are participating in this webinar. Insurable interest has to be there both at the time of insurance and also at the time of a loss. Definitely, utmost good faith principle is the key to the insurance. Contract of indemnities. All property policies are location specific. The next is replacement value. This is the most difficult part for all our four panelists. Definitely, when they would be talking about value insured is always less than the value of the property. Thereby, we have condition of average, so much of discussion. So this is one thing which we should always be very careful about. Then we have proximate cause. The direct cause of loss should be ascertained. Then description of property. This is very vital. If we don't describe our property well, tomorrow when there is a loss, the loss assessor has too much of difficulty in assessing what exactly was the loss and where it is attributable to and how much it will be paid. Very similar to replacement value is adequacy of sum insured. If we are not insured for full, definitely our loss will also not be paid in full. So we have to be careful as insurers. we have to educate our clients in a fashion that they should not try to save some small premium, rather they should be safeguarding their property well. There are few points which I would like to discuss, but I just thought, let me take the next panelist to start with. I have Mr. Shri Mahesh. Just a minute. I would like to give a brief introduction of Shri Mahesh. Shri Mahesh is a good friend of mine. Thank you, Mahesh, for accepting my invite and joining with your colleague, Ashton.
You're welcome, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. Shri Mahesh is in the market since 15 years, and he has been in Saudi and he has been in Dubai for a long time. Shri Mahesh owns the business here in Dubai and has been very successfully running this whole surveyor setup. Millers is one of the very well-known and very reputable surveyor company in UAE. He has handled huge projects, huge losses, and what I appreciate about Sri Mahesh is because we work together in few claims. I appreciate Sri Mahesh is because of his loss mitigation methodology and education. For every survey he has done, he has told the client how to take care of it for the next time. So very few surveyors who come up upfront and tell the client that if you take certain precautions, you will see either no loss or less loss. Definitely for a surveyor, it's not a good business if there are no losses, but the industry should not suffer because losses definitely will happen. Unfortunate situations always come up. But as a good surveyor and as a very reputed surveyor and a very knowledgeable and experienced surveyor like Mr. Lobo, Mr. Mahesh, what they do is they educate the client very intensively. They tell them what all they should take as a precaution next time so that we don't see similar losses at least. So I welcome Sri Mahesh and I request him to start his presentation.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. Let me share my screen first. Hope it's visible.
Yes.
Hi, good evening, everyone.
Evening.
Firstly, I would like to thank each and everyone, the panel, the speakers, the members of the forum, and the insurance, the attendees who have really shown some interest to join this webinar. I feel education is more important in any line of business, irrespective it's insurance, irrespective it's any sort of industry. Education is one thing which has to be taken in everyday record. And being educated is now there are a lot of ways to be educated. Like online studies have become very vital in this market. So webinars which has been arranged on particular risk, particular subjects, I think is more welcomed, and it's good to see participants who have really shown some interest and to take part of it. So I really welcome you all. And today I think we are talking a more vital subject, which is risk improvements and features in the textile industry. And countries like Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, thereafter China, I think these are countries which are more dependent on the GDP, is more dependent on a textile industry forum. And as our previous speaker was talking, there are many factors that the industrialist or any company would only take of a commercial decision, just to improve their profit, just to make sure that economy is going fly. But there are little effort put to make sure that the losses or the risk management efforts has to be taken care. So I think it is primarily important. It is very difficult for any underwriter, like being in the market, to understand the risk, because you write n number of risks, right from textile, right from treatment plans, construction, but it is not vital for any underwriter to know each and every aspect of it. So it becomes very essential to know what primarily involves in an industry. If you're writing a risk for a textile, I think as an underwriter, you should know what is really the process going on and what are the risk features which you will be really facing. And if you know that, I think you might be a good underwriter and you can rightly pinpoint where the risk factors are and you can limit your exposures. At last, it is easy for an owner of an industry to transfer the risk to an insurer, and it becomes their responsibility when a loss comes. So primarily speaking, any sort of industry, everyone has to have a little bit of knowledge. I don't say you need a vast knowledge, you need a little bit of knowledge of what the industry you write. So for me, it is more essential for you to understand. So how I made this presentation for you guys is take you through the manufacturing process in a textile industry and explain you where the risk factors really involves. And the next step would be to identify the risk and what measures can be taken to reduce such losses. So I think I'm not limiting it to a textile industry. It even could be any industry, but I think this is a basic format which anyone has to follow to make sure that everything goes well when the risk is under their custody. So when you talk about textile industry, as we all know, textile is a demand which comes in day-to-day need, and the industry has been predominantly doing well, and there are a lot of demands in the market which has been going on. As rightly said, as the demand goes on, there are very little concern given to the risk management side of it. So what does actually a textile industry consist, like how it's been transferred? The composite unit of a textile industry is on spinning, weaving, dyeing, finishing, and garment manufacturing. So these are major core things which essentially becomes a textile manufacturing process. So before spinning, I think ginning process is one major factor which Mr. George was explaining, where the risk for insurers is too much and there's very little exposure. How those fires or any sort of accidents can be controlled? Ginning is nothing but from the fiber which has been taken out from the field, which has been sorted out and has been sent out to the next course, that is the warehousing in a textile industry. So a textile industry process cycle, this is how it starts. A fiber is nothing but what I'm trying to take it is a cotton. A fiber is a cotton which is taken from the field, transferred it, ginning process has been done, moved to a spinning yard, from where it's just converted, get to a weaving and knitting, and then goes to a wet process, and then garment manufacturing has been done. So each and every, the flow chart itself speaks for itself. Each and every process in a textile industry is hazardous unless it's been monitored well, or it has been secured well, or if there is no proper risk management effort taken, I think there is going to be a disaster. And recent past, we always come across in news that you find textile industry in Bangladesh on fire. There was so much of casualties. There were textile industry in Pakistan which was on fire. There was so much of casualties. And we should ask why these casualties have been happening. Is there anything which we are generally lacking? So at last, there is a loss, and who's protecting them? When an owner has been protected by the insurer. So I think it becomes an insurable interest, or the insurer's rights to know with the manufacturer what are the risks involved and what are the steps which can be taken to make sure that such accidents doesn't happen in future. So with little time available, I just want to go through certain factors which I really feel is important in a textile industry, which is known for any underwriter. So before going to spinning, storage of fiber or the bales, or the cotton bales, is very important. People, as I said, demands have been increasing. So people go procure bales. They don't know, there's no proper planning whether there is a sufficient space to keep these bales. They start accumulating the bales one on the other, rather knowing the rationale, what's going to happen, like spontaneous combustion, which Chalapati was mentioning. There's one major factor with the bales when they are put in a storage yard and it's not been properly maintained. So there's always high likely chances where the bale can be on fire with a spontaneous combustion in it. If the warehouse has not been maintained well, if the party walls are not been too high, where there's no proper storage separation level maintained, there's high chance of this thing to get on fire, and the spread would be very vital, and it is going to be a disaster. So storage of any sort of raw material for a cotton industry is very important. As the building is specified, I've seen an example. I was speaking to one of my friend who works in the textile industry. He was mentioning that even the window glasses, if it's been broken and if it's been exposed to sunlight, and if there's a bale which has been kept inside the warehouse, there's high likely chances that there is also going to be a fire. So these are parameters which we really on a day-to-day life we don't think of. Okay, there's a broken glass, we just leave it until the next maintenance guy comes in and fix it. So, but there are various factors. Even moving the bales within the storage yard or the warehouse or a godown, it is very important, because the statics, when you have a pallet, stacker, a static which generates between them, that is also a vital role to have a fire ignited. As you generally know, like, there's a fire triangle. Fire triangle is very common in a storage of bale in a storage yard. There is also one good example, like when the bales are brought into the factory, when, like, I probably say, like, bales are being offloaded from the trailers. It is more important to keep your trailer switched on condition before you offload the bales, because there are high likely chances there might be a spark which can generate and can easily get into a fire. So I think when you are an industrialist, or when you are into an insurance, we don't go into that depth to see what are the causes which might really have a disaster to happen for an industry. So we had to know each. That's why I'm trying to bring in, like, you need to know what are the general process or the procedures, the process lines of any industry, respective of textile, any industry. So once the stacking is done, the next comes the spinning area, highly hazardous. Why I say the fibers now move to the ballroom. Ballroom is nothing that, basically the bales have been opened within the ballroom, and then it undergoes various process to get into carding and then getting into yarn. So this process involves a lot of action. Like, you have fluffies which gets generated when it is in a ballroom. Those fluffies can just move around the premises. It can get ignited anyway. So those are risks which might have. So spinning gets involved from a fiber manufacturer to a yarn. The spinning, and then it is like, weaving and your waterline. Like, you have dyeing process where chemicals are used. You have your weaving section where the electricals are major concern. So these are the various processes which are involved. So right from fiber to a garment to be manufactured, there are various cycles or various missions or various processes which has been involved, which I see there's a major risk involved in each and every sector. So as an underwriter, it is very essential to be a bit elaborate on what you do and what you write, and know what is the factory actually doing. So this is the basic thing which I think what increases the risk of fire. As I said, in a blow room, you have loose materials, you have fluffies which blows around, and even when you open up a layer of wadding, like, it all creates a lot of potential losses when it gets ignited. So these has to be controlled, and how it has to be controlled, those are risk management sector which has to be implemented or even secured to make sure that doesn't happen. Deposit of fluffs and dust flies. When you say that, these fluffies are light and they can fly. Any blow room has a light fixture or an electrical connect which runs across. And if it's not been maintained well, this flies or the dust gets deposited and later on a heat gets transmitted. This becomes an ignition to the fire or the cause of fire, which is easily moves on or spreads to a vital area. And, like, the whole industry or the sector would have been affected. The other risk factor, what I see, is the oil fibers. When you speak about cotton, it comes along with the seed. And when there's no proper segregation done at the process level or even separation level, the seeds may still be within the cotton in the bales. And if this comes in contamination, and if this creates an issue, there's again a chances of fire which can happen. So this is one thing which also has to be analyzed or even evaluated before we write a business for textile. Rough edge or raw edges or rolls or bales. This is the one which I was talking about, the bales which were maintained in stockyards. When you move, you have your stacker, bale stacker. If the edges are not been maintained well, like, if they get into static current with the bales present, this is again going to lead a fire. I think the topic is more related to fire because that's a major thing which I think we might come across in a cotton or a textile industry. In Gulf, you might even end up having a water damage when it is. But I think primarily what we see in the South Asia, where fires are the major risk. So that's why we're mostly touching about the fire, the causes of fire, which can end up to a big loss payment to an insurer. again, high piles of stock, especially when it's close together. And I said, the awareness to the staff who have been working in the industry is very low. People don't educate them to tell them like, what has to be actually kept, how it has to be kept. So these are things which, when there's a load, when there's a stock which comes in, people, the the staff there and or the labor just moves these bales into the stockyard. They are not been monitored, or they're not been educated to what height it has to be kept and what distance has to be kept. But these are very essential factors, even from right from beginning, that is very essential to make sure a fire can happen anytime. So this has to be very precaution. It has to be guided. Your staff has to be educated in any point of time. And if you see traditional textile mills constructed with lots of wood, that is olden days when you say telling about spinning mills, you have weavers with all woods. I don't know, now it's been all replaced by new technologies, but the chances of fire and the spread is because of the materials which has been normally used there. Next comes the flammable liquids, ignites easily or oxidizing agent that can make an existing fire more intense. So what do you say about flammable liquids? It's again goes back to the education. People just store items, whatever it is. Say, for example, you use chemical like a stainer for an in a weaving process. It's again flammable, but to an extent, it doesn't extend how you use it and keep it. It's more important. So I think in all aspect of it, education and primarily going through the each and every process is very important for an underwriter, as well as for an owner of an industry, because he doesn't want to have a fire tomorrow and just wait for the insurance to pay it later. And as Chalapati was mentioning, only when then we come to the factor of underinsurance, when we come to an insurer interest, where the negotiations and discussion goes on and ends to nowhere. So just to be protected, so let's take the first step of awareness and let's be educated on all the aspect what we follow. I've also identified the process of high fire risk within the textile industry. Opening and carding. We always say like, the bales has to be opened and then taken into the blow room. But certain areas or certain factories, we also see that opening and carding is done in the blow room itself, which is again an essential part. Opening and carding has to be specifically monitored. There are high chances of a fire spark out arising from these activities. Foreign bodies, when your ginning process has not been done properly, everything has been stacked, has been sent to your warehouse. You see, there are many dust accumulations. There might be some metals from the field. In fields, you find so much, which might be a part of the stacks, which has come to the factory. What happens? It produces a fractional heat on a day-to-day activity. This, with natural fiber, becomes a fire triangle, and that also results to a fire. So this has to be well monitored, or it has to be well seen before anything comes in. Opening racks in vigorous process. See, with the industry being very busy, like the operations, like you have orders from your manager, move the stack, just let's do the blowing process. Everything is on. It's like we are on a very quick world now. Everyone wants everything to be done quickly, but such things are very hazardous in a textile industry. It is like, to be well said, even opening up racks in a vigorous process is also one of the essential cause for a fire in a textile industry. So these are things which we don't give a concern when we are really into operations or take care. We are just there as an owner, you want to make money. There's a commercial order, you take commercial decision, so everything goes on. But there are little things to be taken care to avoid casualties. The main factors people die in fires. That's more important. We have to be very careful that we are talking about human beings who have been dying in fire. So I think it is important for anyone to be more essential to take care of risk management aspects. The next, what I would say is the operating missions. See, electrical wiring is one major concern in any of the fires, irrespective it's textile, irrespective you take X, and especially in the Gulf region, short circuit is very common. On a big fire, we always end up saying it's a short circuit. Why? Because there's little thing taken care on the electrics. Electrical wiring has been there for 15 years, 20 years. There's no much maintenance been done. There is an exposure. The insulation failures have been happening. But what happens only when there's a fire, we all come across and say, oh, I would have maintained it if I would have known. But I think it should have been much better. You take a prior action to these days. And in Middle East, I think there's a warranty which has been specifically mentioned in all the underwriting policies. They say like, no, the electrical wiring has to be maintained and there should be an AMC contract. I think for an underwriter, that's a good judge, and it is more essential, at least to prevent losses. With the technology being exposed, like explode, you have sprinkler systems, you have any other system which has been installed. Even these results to a fire, we're only talking about a massive fire. We also come across risk of water damages and many other things which happens in the region. So I think, primarily speaking, all those things comes to an how you monitor your business, how insurance company sees the risk, what efforts can be taken. And Mr. George said, it is much essential when you, before you write a risk, much essential to send someone to the risk, get it inspected, make sure that it's been all secured, and then insurers start writing a risk. This once again, like, I was just going through the process with high fire risk, spinning and weaving. We were just talking about the the initial ginning operations, but like now, even you have hazardous spinning and weaving operations, even there, chances of fire are very high. You have weaving operations where you have senator, which you use. There be housekeeping is much more essential. Ignition of flies, that is a card fly. Card is a very light material, a light fiber, which can fly. Ignition of fly is a major cause of a fire in a textile industry, which I think most of the industrial veteran would have come across. Finishing process, once you're done with all these, so what we see here is each and every process, there is something or other which can result to a fire. So it is a high risk thing which underwriters has to be very open-minded to see and see what are the factors which can be improvised or to mitigate the losses which cannot happen in future. Even finishing process, you have the ovens or the stainers used for thermal bonding. There's a machine which is used generally for heating and drying operation. There's always a heat which gets generated. You're with the fabric. And I think there's always a saying, when a cotton is with the fire, it is high likely chances that anything can happen. So these are various, every process has its characteristic of a fire. So how that could be prevented? So prevention and protection and risk management, this is very vital for any insurance industry or an underwriter to be aware of. As we rightly said, proper stacking and storage is one vital thing which has to be taken care. As you say, storage and stacking, bales and bale handling, this is more vital. As I said, we have come across, in the I'm from India. I'm from a area called Coimbatore. It is very close to Tirupur, where it is quite known for garment manufacturing industries. We just walk across, we just go across, we see smoking zones created for any sort of textile industry. You have no smoking signs, but you see people smoking there. But these are because there's no proper management rules or regulations followed by the owners. But however, certain strict implication can even reduce the chances of fire. Strict the trainings for the staff to make sure that their handling process has been well maintained, well done. I think these are things which has to be essentially put forward to all the staff in an industry, because you can't just stay back and say, oh, there's a fire, it happened, and then let's insurance company pay it. It is a joint responsibility for the industry and for the underwriter to make sure that. So that's why we were always talking about utmost good faith. It's a big say in the insurance. You are giving your risk to, you're passing your risk to insurers. They think you have been maintaining the premises as it's been required. So it is much better for anyone to see housing. So it's more important to have a risk inspection done before you write a risk and identify if it's been well maintained, housekeeping level has been kept high, electrical wirings have been kept checked every day, staff awareness, no smoking signs, and more importantly, this firefighting system, how it's been improvised. Let's later, we had a classic example because one of the major fire which I dealt here is for a paper factory. And once the fire was there, the next time what happened is there were less of insurance company who really came up to write up the risk. But insured took some special interest. He installed some fabulous firefighting system. And and I was asked to go for a risk inspection because I've done the fire. So they knew that I might know much better. They asked me to go and have a look at it. But I went back with a very good report to the underwriters. And you believe it or not, the there were a lot of insurance companies who came forward to insure the risk. So that shows the interest what mutually has to be put forward by an insurer and even by the insured. So I think it's a mutual understanding or the efforts to be taken. So there's one
Yeah.
flow which
Sri Mahesh, in fact, because you said about this particular fire loss,
Yeah.
I just thought, should I request George also to give a live example of one of the fire situations?
I would appreciate, sir. I would appreciate.
Yeah, please. Uh, George, can you give us a scenario of a live claim which you have handled, a major one in Pakistan, for the benefit of all our members? I think you're on mute. Yeah, thank you.
We've been talking about bales. Well, I'll tell you about a fire in bale storage. We have in Karachi what is called the TPX, Toll Produce Yard. And we have a public sector corporation that had over 140,000 bales stored there. The fire, when it hit, the fire struck and burnt for almost 3 weeks, 2+ weeks. 110 bales went up in smoke. That's a lot of cotton. So everything was lacking. Firefighting, approach to the plinths that were on fire, various. So that particular fire is one of the largest in my memory. So that's what I would mention. As to fires within a textile mill, we see them very frequently. And fortunately, there are firefighting measures in place now on a much improved basis compared to, shall I say, even 10 years ago. With the result that fires now in textile mills are usually in storage. A process fire is taken care of by the more conscientious spinners have got fire prevention at various stages of their plants. But storage is always a huge hazard. And because of maybe the construction of the warehouse, when cotton is stacked inside at the peak of the season, it goes almost to the roof. No place for firefighting. And all you can do is point hoses, fire hoses through the windows or the skylights and hope to drench the warehouse. That's not always effective time-wise. And so it might go on for days. The fire will burn and burn and burn. Talking about upgraded storages like sprinklers in warehouses, not too many plants have sprinklers in a warehouse. They have sprinklers in process, but not in the warehouse. And I think we should encourage textile spinners to have sprinkler and automatic gas systems in warehouses. It's not cheap, but in the long run, it's economical for everybody to have those systems. Yes, the initial cost may be a little high, but if you look at the repercussions of a fire, the cost is nothing. So my take on this is to introduce automatic firefighting in textile storages, not just in the process area. Okay. What else?
Yeah. Actually, Mahesh, you have few more slides or
I think this is my last slide, so just to show an
okay, yeah,
example,
please, yeah, please, yeah. No, because this is an interesting slide which we definitely want to elaborate.
uh, so I just made up this one protection control, what can lead to a major fire or to a small fire, whatever get originated. You have cotton bales and fire source, and you have cotton storage fire. See, detection and extinguishment, that it also depends on how this get detected and how fast the staff or the management is able to act to it. See, one, you have a quality of a fire brigade. The two, you have your own staff who's been trained to extinguish smaller fires, which could be developed into a major one later. But if you've been practicing that within the industry, and if your staff is being put on drills and been managed well on how to handle it, I think major fires can be protected to an extent, irrespective whatever it is, or not with textile, any other industry. This training of staff, the awareness of staff, and the education of staff, what I feel as an adjuster is more important. And that is going to be transferred to the underwriter, and where they feel comfortable to write any sort of risk. And once they know it's been well protected and they are safe enough to write, it doesn't mean that underwriters are only writing a bad risk. It happens sometimes it goes following that they write a risk which they don't have no knowledge about. But I think it is vital to have a little knowledge on what you write and what you take it forward. It's easy when it comes to claim handling. It's easy for an adjuster to explain the process and why it's been resulted so far. So I think this is primarily what I wanted to bring in during this discussion. And if you have anything to ask, I'm quite happy to answer it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Shri Mahesh. In fact, I have a few questions coming up. One is for both George and Mahesh. Uh, Akhtar Kudus has requested for an answer that there has always been continuous conflict in priorities between the underwriters and risk insurers within the industry. How do you convince the industry leadership to take a long-term view on the competition and the safety conflicts?
I think for any industries, or as an industrial owner or the owner, uh, see, insurance comes as secondary. It has to be the owners of any owner to make sure that every what he does is secured. Because the act, what we say is once an incident happens, he has to predominantly act as a person who doesn't have an insurance. But if a person takes that effort and makes sure that everything is in order, I don't think so. There might be a conflict for the insurers to take that risk and write it. And I think it is easy for them and get convinced that, okay, you're writing a healthy risk.
Okay. Mr. George, can you please add your expert comments on this? Should I repeat the question? George, you are on mute.
Yeah. Okay. Is that better now?
Yeah.
Sorry, what was that question again?
No, Akhtar Kudus, one of the participants, has requested for a question, reply that the industry has been very competitive and there is conflict on how to accept a risk. So, keeping long-term view, how the insurers and the underwriters look at this sort of risk.
First of all, I think the audience should know Akhtar Kudus is a chemical engineer who we consult quite often. And he's an independent chemical engineer. Right.
Okay.
So the question is really quite basic. Before insuring a property, the textbook says you do a risk inspection. Unfortunately, for commercial considerations, that's not always the case. Therefore, an agent may walk into an insurance company and say, I have this client and I need this risk covered. And shall I say 4 times out of 5, the company says, all right, what's the sum insured and what kind of risk is it? And okay, here's your cover note. if safety and fire prevention are made important issues in the proposal form and at the time of applying for insurance, then I'm going to come back to Akhtar Kadus. We can use people like him to tell us what the shortcomings in that industry are with regard to at least to fire prevention and other risks. So I think the whole psyche in ensuring, let's say, a textile mill and not just picking up, or the other traditional method is, oh, what did the previous insurer do? So let's copy that policy and issue rather than have a proper risk inspection. And I advocate very strongly that risk inspections be done.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Tilapathy, Mr. Lobo also shared us the survey which can be conducted. So maybe I can share that briefly as well. So, Mr. Lobo, you shared this checklist with us. So
Yes.
yeah, you can. So this is very elaborate and very detailed. And so for those of our attendees who are participating from the insurance industry, I can see that they have a lot of questions regarding these things. So I think you've made a very elaborate recommendation checklist. So I'll briefly go through all these 3-4 slides. So if you can briefly just elaborate a bit on that.
Sure, please.
So Mr. Lobo has shared this checklist with us, and he has suggested that the surveyors, they follow this kind of checklist, and even for the customers who are going to sort of follow this. So what he has shared with us is a detailed checklist, and then at the end there are recommendations as well. So Mr. Lobo, do you want me to go further, or you want to share some details on this slide?
Well, if anyone has a specific question, pick any of these point marks. Adequate fire breaks between stacks. Are they adequate or not? There should be, some insurers want 50 feet, some want 20 feet. So it depends on that particular policy. So next is between the stack, the stock and the wall. That should be 20 feet. So similarly, right through this list, every question has a generic answer. And then if it is industry specific, because of the construction of a particular spinning mill or a warehouse, that you may not be able to stack appropriately, then you amend your recommendation.
Yeah. Usman Saab, I just wanted to add this one important thing to all our participants. All participants who have shared their email IDs, they will be getting 2 things. One is a copy of our presentations, and we will be also, as a token of appreciation for attendance, we will be issuing a e-certificate to each participant. So I request all participants to stay along till the end, so that we can have the names and numbers, and we can deliver their certificates to their email IDs. Yeah.
So
because this questionnaire is quite elaborative.
Yeah.
And Usman Saab, I can also request you that you can share our personal email IDs with the participants. Maybe if somebody has a particular question.
So, sir, we have the email addresses of all the attendees. So
Yeah,
all those
fantastic.
all those who have registered So we will be sending out all the documentation from this webinar, like the presentations and these checklists, to all our participants who have attended this session. So you will get, we have the all email addresses of all the people. Yeah.
Sure. I just wanted to. There is one-liner question from Imran Mughal. Why the size of losses have increased progressively? Very interesting question. In fact, both Sri Mahesh and George, you can answer this. So, in the earlier days, losses were small. Why the losses have become bigger this currently?
Because recently you see that the textile industry has grown, any industry, because of the demands coming up, been growing. And so that clearly answers the question, because there's an increase. The
Yeah.
losses, what we speak. Yeah, technology has been improvised. There are a lot of technology which has come, but still there's a lack, which on the demand process is there. There's a lack of something from the industry which has to be taken care to avoid such losses. So that's why predominantly, which I was talking through my this thing is education and how everyone has to be trained to mitigate losses to an extent.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. George. Because you would have seen two generations of businesses now, so definitely you can say why the losses have grown now. You are on mute. The speaker, please. Sir, your speaker is off. Yeah,
Better
please.
now?
yeah.
Okay. The simple answer is inflation. If you look at losses in the 60s, if it were 100, it's not going to be 100 today. It's going to be 100 to, let me say, the power of 2 or more. So inflation is is reason number one. Reason number two is, if you look at any machine, a textile machine from those days, compared to a machine today, today's machine will have quantum improvements in profile, performance, output, consumption, power consumption, everything. So there will be differences in the value then compared to the value now. As far as stock is concerned, cotton stock, for instance, that goes with the market. The market governs the price of cotton or cotton seed on that day, on a particular day. So prices today are traditionally higher than they were 40, 30, 40, 50 years ago. So again, inflation. I don't know if I've answered that question.
No, perfect. In fact, I was very happy because I thought for a one-liner we can always have a one-liner answer as well. But thanks for the description. In fact, I want to thank Akhtar Kudus and Imran Mughal. Maybe we already found two speakers for our next webinar. Because Imran Mughal wants to share a few instances on claims. But because if we are running a little bit on time, I request Aston Picardo to please take over the presentation. Aston, please.
Yes. Am I audible?
Yeah, very much.
Yes.
Yeah. Good evening, respected members. Thank you for joining into this forum. As part of my engagement today, I shall run you all through one of the cases that I have personally been involved in, cases of textile fire. My colleagues before me in the panel of speakers have already addressed or shed light on how fires are typically started. I would like to just give you a little bit more of a practical approach on one of the cases that we have seen. The topics that I shall be discussing today are primarily, as you can see on your screen. I'll give you a little bit background on the entity involved, a brief on the incident, details on the extent of damage suffered, challenges faced by both insurers and the insured, mitigation efforts jointly undertaken, road to recovery of losses, resumption of business and operation, and finally, lessons learned. So to begin with, the company that had suffered such a loss was an already established and set up facility in the GCC. This company had sold off its assets to one of the very well-known and reputed European firms who had been operating in the global market since 1953. So as you can see, they were already stalwarts in the industry. The takeover was primarily to give them access to higher production capabilities and gain greater market share. Just to give you some company stats, the facility allowed the company to produce around 20 million linear meters of cloth annually. With a gross profit of around 12.5 million, the company was already on a road to achieve more success in the coming years. So everything looked hunky-dory until the fateful day of 19 February 2011. Just a year over since the takeover, the company faced to deal with a major fire outbreak within its production facility. Investigations revealed that the fire had originated from an electrical short circuit within the exhaust flue, attaching the sizing machine. As you can see, these are typically the electrical fires that you really see. Self-combustion of bales are the other sources that are very, very commonly seen. And the electrical fires are the others that we really need to take care of because they're very common too. If you can recall the slide that my colleague Sri Mahesh had shown with regards to detection of fire, I think that is always a very essential part of mitigating a loss. Now, in this scenario, what had happened was the fire had started in the roof level. So it had gone unnoticed for quite some time until some of the staff on duty had seen smoke billowing from the roof. Now, alarms were raised. People, some of the staff panicked, but they had a fire team, already trained on board, who sprang into action and tried to do their best to, attack the fire. But obviously, access was a problem, and they were not successful. So an emergency call to the civil defense was placed. The civil defense came in and the fire, but unfortunately, by then the fire already grown. And it took around 10 to 12 hours for the fire to have been extinguished. Nevertheless, because of the fire loading, because of the stock within the facility and the machinery, there were flare-ups which continued for the next few days. So you can see that it was a small fire. As I said, it was a short circuit that occurred within the exhaust fan. The sparks had actually ignited the cotton fiber or flue which had collected in the ventilation ducting. The prevailing winds at that time actually contributed to the spread, and the embers fell on to the nearby building. That building was actually where the weaving loom was, weaving machines were installed. So once the roof had caught on fire, then again the spread continued because of the collected fluff within the building. Just to give you guys a little bit of how, if you see the first picture to your left, shows the area where the exhaust fan was. And the picture on the right shows the exhaust fan after it was removed off. This was identified by the forensic experts who had come in to investigate into the cause of the fire. The next picture shows you a similar exhaust fan, and you can very clearly see there is a lot of fluff. If I can try to zoom in, a lot of fluff around the exhaust fans. Similarly, on top of the roof, sorry. Similarly, if you can see, this is the roof area. Again, a lot of fluff was blown onto the roof and had spread across. So as you can see that the extent of damage that that the company had suffered as a result of this little short circuit was catastrophic. There were around 114 weaving looms and ancillary machines which were housed within the unit, which were rendered a total loss. There was smoke damage, which is a resulting damage to the other interconnected buildings from where the soot had spread. The stock within the facility was also affected. There was stock which was work in progress, and there was stock of raw materials and semi-finished goods also, which were lying in the vicinity and within the building, which was rendered a total loss. Fixtures or fittings of the office buildings around. In addition, because of the falling debris, access was also affected. So that also created some kind of a hindrance in fighting the fire. So this incident, which could have been quite minor if it was handled properly, eventually ended up being a loss of around $9 million, with a loss of profit of circa $1.3 million. So it was one of the really major losses in the region. I would just like to show you some few photographs which illustrates the extent of damage. This is the weaving loom. You can see the weaving machines all in a line, and you can see how the roof has collapsed, and there's been intense burning within the building. This is a view from the roof. As you can see, the entire roof on one section was completely burnt out. And you had, so since the heat had travels upwards, the roof and the insulation were getting burnt, and those burnt parts were falling onto the machine, and the machines were catching fire. Obviously, there was stock within it which caught fire too, and which added on to the damage. Going about the challenges faced. Now, the immediate challenge post a fire incident lies primarily in the salvaging measures and the loss mitigation efforts to be taken. There would be material and there would be stock and also plant and machinery which would have luckily been spared by the fires, which needs to be taken into control and moved out from that particular area, so that you do not have any flare-ups affecting it, nor any falling debris to cause damage to them. So in addition, there would, you may have stock which is sensitive to light, heat, and water. So those are one of the aspects which one would need to look into to try to mitigate or salvage what is left of the assets. The other issue would obviously be the staff. Now, any incident which has a catastrophic damage to the plant will obviously have a very adverse effect on the staff, because you have skilled and unskilled staff. Now it all depends on the business if they would be able to take care of that staff until it is back into operation. And that's a decision which is very, very tricky. And you would need to have certain protections or certain financial protections in place to able to deal with it appropriately. Some of the other challenges that I would like to just highlight shortly is obviously to commence production, because there would be orders already in place, and those orders would need to be honored by the facility and the company. And that's going to be one of the key challenges. How are you going to meet those demands now, considering that there has been considerable damage or a complete stop in the production. Reputation loss, for obvious reasons. If you have a fire, there are people in the chain of the industry who is depending on you guys. A fire obviously is not something that you want to have in your records. The other aspect would be information, informing your key customers to explain that there has been a mishap and to gain their support and understanding. You would have, obviously, your production capacity would be halted, and if it's one of the major lines affected, then it would just be a complete stop. You can look into competitor support to gain some assistance in production, but obviously you have the commercial and practical problems associated with it. You would have quality issues if you would try to look into outsourcing a part of the production which has been affected. As I said earlier, staff cost has to be taken care and other overheads of the facility. Then we go into the lead time of machinery, or if they are even available in the market, if you're able to procure the spares for the particular machinery, or able to procure the machinery, the complete machinery part in itself, I mean, depending on the extent of damage suffered. Look into, one of the key things that I would like to highlight was in this instance too, one of the key ways of mitigating the loss was the insured sprang into action immediately and sourced the global market. I mean, he's not looked into only the local market, but gone and found out through his connections to try and source second-hand machineries immediately. Because as you can see, these are highly, machineries with a very high lead time, and you're not going to get 114 weaving machines, brand new weaving machines off the shelf. So, but then again, you would have to have, procedures in place to ensure that the second-hand machineries are obviously inspected and seen that the condition has been verified. Before shipping, you would need to look into, inspect them, then obviously shipping costs, installation costs, getting into probably connecting with the OEMs to ensure that the installations have been properly done. Once you have procured and even have the facility up and running, then again, it's a process, because you are not going to be achieving 100% production during day one. It's a process that would be time consuming, and it has to be gradually increased until you reach and the production that you were meaning to attain. With regards to mitigation efforts, again, I think a lot of things has to be done in tandem. Engaging, this is where expertise of the loss adjusters come into play. It's trying to get the right people in at the right time. You would need structural engineers to assess the building damage and to give their views and their assessment of what can be done, if at all. Likewise, the OEM of the plant and machinery needs to be involved to ensure that you are able to get in the plants and equipment in the shortest possible time. Now, I think what comes primarily into all of this is to draw out plans to ensure that there is least interruption period. As you can see, not all people would have, not all companies rather would have a cover for loss of profits. Those who would definitely be protected to a greater extent, but those who don't would be suffering not only material damage, but loss of profits for all the time that their processes have been interrupted. Now, to drawing out the plan, I think one of the key aspects is to involve the floor staff into planning, because you would have, I think, the best ideas given by the people who have hands-on experience on the machineries and the processes that they have been managing for all those years. Options into looking into alternative factory premises, storage units should be looked into. And another key aspect that I think is important is to see if the semi-finished or the products in the stage that they are and cannot be processed further due to the damage can be sold to the market in a particular condition, so as to reduce the loss of profits. Road to recovery, again, an execution team should be identified and engaged immediately. One of the good aspects in this whole messed up scenario of having a fire damage is that it gives you an opportunity to try and make improvements into the existing facility. The company can look into finding ways of incorporating new technology processes rather than going into the same old process that they have been running for all the years. They can look into new improved machinery, upgrade their firefighting detection and protections, and also look into trying to comply with the latest construction standards as set by the local authorities. So this is a light at the end of the tunnel, I would say. Lessons learned. Now, one of the key lessons learned in this particular scenario is the housekeeping aspect. As you can see, if it was not for the fluff deposits across the floor, shop floor, and the ducting, the fire spread wouldn't have been this major, and the loss probably would have been quite a minor. As rightly already elaborated by my fellow panelists earlier, education of staff and maintenance personnel is key. If people know what they do and they are told to do it right, they would know how to act at the appropriate time. Fire drills should be carried out, and if possible, the local authorities should be engaged in order to provide practical training of the staff so that you attend to firefighting at the earliest stage so that to prevent spread and major losses. Drawing out a preventive maintenance plan of plant and machinery and the electrical installations is again very much key, as they are one of the main sources of fires. And generally having a written disaster management plan in place will help save a lot of time once such an unfortunate incident has occurred. That's it from me. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ashton. It was quite a elaborate and very precise presentation on the claim. Those who are in the market definitely know which client we are talking about. And as a matter of privacy, we have tried to keep the name of the clients and the regions out of discussion because for known reasons. I think I should introduce Ashton, otherwise Ashton will not like me. Ashton is part of Miller's International, and he operates from Dubai currently. He has been in Riyadh before, like Sri Mahesh, and he has very strong experience in business interruption, engineering, and liability claims. So we have been associated with. Sorry, I think so he has been in the market for the last 7 years, handling major claims in this region. And he has been in Bahrain before Dubai. And thank you, Ashton. I think there was a small confusion between you and Sri Mahesh, because you both look alike also.
We complement each other.
Yeah. In fact, if you see the chair you are using, both the chairs are similar.
Yes, absolutely.
So I
It's
got
in fact
confused.
the same chair, the same office.
Thank you so much, and it was a fantastic presentation.
Thank you for the lovely
in fact,
insight.
my next speaker is Mr. Faisal Khan. He has been very conspicuous not to show himself on the screen as well, because he has been answering a lot of question and answers when we were discussing our presentations. Thank you, Faisal, for that.
Thank you.
Faisal Khan is chief. Yeah, so, sorry, just I'll take a few minutes to introduce you. Faisal Khan is the chief risk officer of IGI General in Pakistan, and he's an expert in risk management, property and casualty insurance. And he has been in the market for the last 20 years. He has been both with the national companies and the private sector. And he is part of the Insurance Association of Pakistan, and he has been appointed as the chairman for a current tenure. I welcome Faisal, and I request him to present his case. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jalapati. Thank you much. Let me bring my presentation to screen. I think yes. Well, yes. Thank you very much again, all of you, for giving us, especially me, a chance to speak in this distinguished panel here. Well, I'm told that in this presentation, we are expecting some of the insureds, the local textile customers we have. And somebody was asking in one of the questions here that why and how do we have this longer term view in terms of the highly competitive market and industry here. Well, I must say that, it is our, love for this industry, which cannot be extinguished. And that's the main reason for the fierce competition we have, when it comes to pricing. So, well, in this presentation, we will see some of the things which I would like to touch on in terms of how we can improve upon both on the risk and also managing our portfolios. But for textile, we must say that let's reap more from what we sow, rather than what you sow. There's a lot of learning to come from the business actually. And when you're here to manage our own businesses, there is a lot of effort most of the time on the operational management. And, the major focus is obviously there on the production and maximizing the profits. Well, there is obviously has to be a tilt in terms of the risk management. And why I say this, because there you have your main assets to protect. And this only is possible once you have a very sound fire safety plan and preparedness for your own teams to see and fight a situation which is untoward for your business. And that obviously reflects on your overall operational management as well. So risk management, most of the time, we need to see either it is perceived as an expense or it's an earning. The problem is that most of the time when many of the risk engineers or the loss adjusters, they go and see the sites and visit the customers and suggest about the risk improvements, it is obviously perceived as a major expense to continue. The only thing is that you will only realize when you have seen the fires yourselves, and especially the big fires, and only then you would realize that was it an expense or could have proved as an earning for yourselves had you invested the capital besides you invest in what you invest in your own production facilities. So the negligence or the oversight actually leads to not only the property damage or the loss of your profits, but also the reputational loss. And that is what many people actually forget when they, when they only talk about the operations of the businesses and the continuity management. This is something which is really very, very serious, that whenever an insured or a customer or a textile spinner, be it in the made-up goods or the finishing or the fabrics, you see, you always have your commitments to meet. And God forbid, if you have a major situation on the side, and if you keep on having these kind of situations regularly or too often, you would obviously have a reputational loss. And that's what leads to the uninsurability, as we say, for many of the risks we see in our day-to-day lives. And probably there are some underwriters there in the distinguished audience we have here, or the participants, and they would obviously agree that most of the time when you talk about some of the businesses, the big businesses here, the only thing which comes to your mind is the frequency of the losses. Obviously, severity is of much importance in textile business, and especially the losses, but it's most of the time the frequency which gives you a bit of an untingling feeling. Well, a snapshot of the Pakistani market, as we have many people in from Pakistan, and obviously some of our the people from the audience from the international community. We were the third largest in the world in terms of the yarn production, and only after China, India, and Bangladesh, we're the fourth major producer of cotton in the world. Third largest consumer of the cotton, which obviously comprises 46% of the total manufacturing we have here. We are the 8th largest exporter of the textile products in Asia, and the bulk of our exports actually coming in from this very segment. So this tells you that this is indeed a very, very important business sector for the insurance community here in Pakistan. Well, I'd just like to tell you a brief about the cotton. I think many of the people who are here would agree that they have seen nothing more dangerous than a cotton fire. Yes, there are obviously the bigger ones, especially in the fertilizer or the polymer sector, or the energy sector as well. But you talk about the every now and then the medium to large scale industrial fires, the major culprit is basically the cotton. But then again, we need to see that what's the science behind it. And here you see that the 85% almost is the content here we have is basically the cellulose. And then you also have the waxes and the fats. The other thing here, as you see, let me see if I can bring about my, no, I could not see the laser light, which I couldn't highlight. But then again, if you could see the mouse here, you see this very molecule looks like an organic compound, an organic molecule, which is very much to the likes of the toluene. And people who are the geniuses in the chemistry would really much appreciate that this looks like toluene here, and that is highly flammable. This is what you see here, the structure of a cotton fiber, that how it looks like if you look very closely and you see that what are the basic components of this. And whenever there is a fire, you see, the very first thing which you could see is the secondary wall with the several layers on top of the very end part of the staple fiber here. So, in the later part of the presentation, you will see how this could relate to the fires. For the property insurance business in Pakistan, I would say, it's sitting in the property committee for some time, and we gather a lot of numbers here. We see it's almost $20 million worth of premium every year, and that is only coming from the property insurances, which includes the property and the engineering, and not the marine and the miscellaneous part. While on the other hand, it's almost like $30 million worth of losses we pay out to the sector. So you see, I'm not the happiest man here. And then again, it's not, though we know that there's a lot of business actually coming in from this sector, we do also have to keep in mind that there is a lot to be done to improve the overall perception of the business. And that is only possible when we invest heavily into the risk management and the mitigation in terms of how to avoid major losses. Well, some of the common problems in the textile sector, as we have, many of our distinguished guests have touched base upon, these are the electrical hazards, the housekeeping, and mostly the storage, be it the open or in the godowns. Many of the common hazards, as we talk about here, are the smoking rule violations, inadequacy of the firefighting equipment, lack of hazard awareness in the workers, hot works, and hazardous material handling. These are many of the things as we talk about in every day, but we probably not give the real importance that how best we can look into these and how best can these be improved upon. And you will see in some of the later part of the slides where I have tried to gather some of the photographs from whatever surveys we have done in the past. We talk about the occupational hazards. Yes, there is indeed a high concentration of combustible stocks, the highly combustible nature of the cotton, as we see. The cotton fluff is all over the place. The funny thing we see in the when we go into a blow room, the very first time when I visited the textile, almost like 20 years back, and it was the very first of my surveys there. I always just thought that why do we call this place a blow room? Coming in from the fire perspective and the insurance industry, you see something you blow. You see, this is something you deal with in everyday life here when you are in textile business, and that is the most hazardous part of or the very first place where you have these fires, many of the big fires. We also see many times here that the textile, especially in the countries like the third world countries where we are kind of energy starved, we do not have a very much reliance on the public means when it comes to the electricity supply in some of the industrial areas, even in the larger cities. In the peak summer seasons, people tend to have their own energy production, and that is where you add more risks to your facility. And when you talk about the fossil fuel based solutions or the biofuel solutions, when you talk about the major power generation on the site to the tune of 10 megawatts to 12 megawatts usually for the plants which are as big as 200,000 spindles, 4 or 5 units in one space, hundreds of acres of land there. There's a much bigger site to manage, and there the whole of the risk actually turns into rather than a textile to turn into an energy risk, because you have huge energy generation on that very site, and especially if you have the biofuels, you talk about the biomass, and you talk about the huge stocks there of the husks, be it the rice husk, be it the any kind of the husk which you burn in the boilers, the big water tube boilers you have, or whatever boilers you need to run your turbines. It is again a very, very big risk. And usually, if it is not well thought out, when we talk about the overall plan or the overall plan of the facility, it becomes much of a condition. So here we talk about the commodity classification, and it states the NFPA 13 standard. It falls into the combustible products with any type of packaging. It include the Group C plastics. So that is how you treat when you come to understanding of how this has to be looked into. Now, in this part of the presentation, we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. You will see some of the pictures here, and what we come across in our everyday life. And that I thought that it's a good idea to show that many of the people who are from the industry itself, I mean the spinning or the textile industry here, would learn that how some of the best practices can help in avoiding the major fires. Well, this guy is actually not at all trying to extinguish any fire by making use of this hose. Here you see, it's mere purpose of gardening, I would say, rather. This is not me, obviously. What's wrong here? Here you see, it's as you see when you say it's housekeeping. Oh, I would really dare not say that it is kept or well kept here. Electrical hazards. Somebody was just telling us about the major cause, the major culprit. Most of the time is the electricity, and here we see that how it looks like most of the time for the medium or the smaller units, which are not very much they're keen to invest heavily into this place. Well, the amazing part here you see this fire extinguisher is very well surrounded by the stocks all around. So in first place, whenever you're supposed to reach the fire extinguisher to control, you see how you do that. Some untied cylinders. Yeah, what a classic example of a storage here. It's one of the textile units, and usually what they say that they have a day stock for the production, and which they keep very much close to the blow rooms or the plucking areas. Now here you see that the side of the mill is the stack height is usually is very much to the same level of the godown or the mill, and it's again very, very close, in fact adjacent to the mill. Just think for a second that if God forbid there is any incident here, what would happen to this whole facility? Probably many of you are not, if not very close to your screens, might not have observed the slightest thing here. And if you go and look closely a bit, you would see that there is an electric wire which is running over this space, and it's a very thin wire. As you can see, that the picture is taken from a bit far, just to catch the whole of the scene here. You see that this wire is actually above this stalk and crossing that very mill. And what we have seen in the past, that some of the fires, because of this cotton fluff and then cotton, and usually some of the ill maintenance of this facility, you see that there could be the fire which can be ignited because of this electrical surge here, the electrostatic charges at this place. Again, well, some of the people in Pakistan who could read in Urdu language, you see, this is a smoking area, and the very next place you see is the stalks which are kept there, the finished stock kept there outside, very much adjacent to the mill. And then again, you are asking people to go and smoke here. Conditions, you see some of the poor housekeeping here. This is what we usually see every day. Loose wiring is almost touching the waste stocks here. This is a typical, I'm not saying that every single unit here is like that, but mostly, yes, for the smaller units, which are like smaller than 20,000, 10,000 spindles, mostly ring spinning or open-ended spinning, where we have these kind of situations. Most of the time you see the extension cables. You see here, they're the spliced wirings, and the supplies from one place to the other and that's could be one of the basic sources of the fire. The picture speaks for itself. So here, when I talk about this, you keep in the stocks the flammable stocks. Besides the other combustible goods you have, you see it becomes a misery. And here you see that how beautifully this is kept. This lubricant and the drums. This poor guy is welding in this very place. We see there is a lot of obviously manpower around, but we don't see anybody with a fire extinguisher or even a hose nearby who could control any other incident. And we are seeing that this is, the very much part of the mill. Cigarette butts right outside the plucking area and the blow rooms. And a wall bracket fan rather, without a casing, without a housing. And you have seen here that huge fluff is just waiting to be blown into this fan. Wow. The electric lights right above these machines, and you see how nicely they are all, surrounded with this cotton fluff. And nowadays we don't have these kind of lights mostly because we have like the people are going into the energy saving, and you have LED. But when these were the tube lights with the chokes, electric chokes there, hanging from the ceilings. You see what happens is the fluff gets stuck to the chokes, and usually when you switch on these lights in the evening or even in the daytime, you see little sparks coming out because of its, the mechanism, how it is lighted. And then only you see that how this could help you catch a fire. In famous fire triangle, how do we do that? So the treatment is only that we have these the guidelines most of the time here, all the NFPA specific recommendations we give mostly. This pumping station for the hydrants, NFPA 20 stand. Most of the time, what happens is that when you go and you see there was on the many textiles here, there was a tendency for people to get discounts for these firefighting equipment they have. But mostly what happens is that if they're not well kept and they're not well designed, it would probably be of no use to anybody. So Akhtar Qudus, I just saw in one of his comments was telling us about the thermography, and that is really very, very important that you have the thermography done for many of your the electrical appliances you have within the factory premises, so that that what of the areas actually would require an urgent attention. Then you have the spark arresters here, and which is extremely important for our for industry in the textiles, where we deal in daily basis, the huge stocks coming in to your site, and that is what is actually applied on the top of the exhaust pipes of the engines of the trucks, bringing in the stocks of the cotton stocks or your factory. Here we see a lot about the cotton storage warranties, the gangways George was talking about earlier in the earlier part. How can we keep it? The distances, it's all very important. This is usually what we use here in Pakistan. The warranties for the very specific warranties which are kept or kind of incorporated on the policies here, and can become a very source of of your contention with your customers, because that is what is applied most of the time when there is a big loss and you see that these distances here are not very well maintained. That is the distances between the cotton heaps and the cotton storage areas. Now here you see some of the good places which are very well kept here, and you see that how the distances are kept. Spill containment is extremely important. We keep all your lubricants. Always a designated area for the firefighting. Then again, you maintain something in front the other, which is not the obstacle or very much easily approachable to these electrical panels, be it the stocks or anything like that. So most of the time, people also rely on the specific on the gravity operated fire systems, and you see at times how this would operate when you have no pressurized supply to the hydrant point. The standard says was 750 GPM fire pump to be installed to have the pressure, which is somewhere close to 75 to 100 psi to combat any of your fires. That's a bit about the overall snapshot of what I could show to our distinguished audience and the panelists. So we invite the questions here, and if there is any.
Thank you so much, Faisal. In fact, I think the pictorial representation is much more effective. I think I hope some of the industry captains who are there on the participation, definitely they would have picked up a lot of points here. I have a true interesting questions. This is for all the four panelists, and we'll make it quick because I think we are running a bit more than our allotted time. Why always short circuit is the cause? So maybe briefly, 30 seconds each panelist. Mr. George, you are on mute.
Yeah, short circuit. As I was explaining through my presentation, one common factor what we see here is short circuiting, and the key factors are like any other system, which can be like you have firefighting system which can be annually maintained, and there's a procedure which has to be followed. There's some regulations in the country where you have to follow it mandatory. But for electrical systems, there's nothing as such that you really need to do a thermography, a test, or and you maintain the. I don't think so. There's anything as a code being suggested, unless insured by his own interest does take some interest to make sure and rectifies things which happens. So as we said, people are interested to make money. They don't see for the risk management side of it. So I think it is more essential. So what leads is the older the days as it goes, the cable gets the installation gets failed, and there's results to a short circuit, which ends up to a fire. So that's my answer to it.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Lobo.
I have something to add there. if you look at a well-managed industry, especially one either multinational or very high up on the national program, they have a system of electrical audits which are lacking for everyday operations. So I wonder if there's a way that you can include vessel maybe in the warranties, that there should be an electrical audit. Because if there's no electrical audit, it can go on for 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 15, and more years without an inspection.
Yeah.
So,
Great.
Few of the insurers in the market, and UAE especially, there are few insurers who have really put this as a warranty now these days. Which has
excellent.
taken up, yes, and not to every insurers I say, but there are few insurers who have already put that as a specific warranty, saying that the wiring has to be maintained, and you then as an adjuster, when you inspect it or do your survey, we ask what is your last maintenance record. So I think that's been now initiated in the region.
Nowadays, I think the pre-risk inspection is a must now in at least the UAE market, and a few of the bigger companies are also going midterm survey as well.
Yeah,
especially the multinational companies. Faisal and Ashton would like to add something on the short circuit story, because this is predominantly like every survey report will end up with a cause of loss as a short circuit. So I saw on the background, Akhtar Kudus says, boss, this is not the only reason. You have to go deep into that.
Right. If I might give my two piece into this, is basically I think there is a lot of lack of awareness and, if I may say, cost-cutting procedures. I think the maintenance staff should be very much aware of the installations in the particular facility, and they should have the support of the management to invest money where they see the installations are getting older and renew them. Now this is something that we see is lacking, because once a facility is built, the owners probably think the investment is done. The only other cost would be staffing cost and raw material cost. So unfortunately, and maintenance is seen as changing light bulbs, and it starts there and stops there. I mean, that is an aspect that needs to be taken care of very, very. A person really needs to take a look into this, and this has, and again, cheap installations. I mean, the market is flooded with products which is available for 1/10 of the price that it used to be available. I mean, quality of products of electrical installations is very, very important. You should know if the installations are meeting industry standards or not just picking them up off the shelf and installing them. This is what I feel should be looked into very deeply.
Thank you. Faisal, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I would agree. Thanks for lighting this question up. Yes, this is extremely important. Usually what we see in the industry when we go and see these clients and the real time, basis, we see that there is a very less interest, usually, because this is most of the time the easiest thing to blame on, as we all said, in case of a fire. The only problem we see in attending is that we are probably not using the right things at the right place, and we are not. It's not just the matter of the price. It's just also to see that how best this could have been addressed had we taken some time to think that what kind of fitting for this appliance is required. Most of the time, what happens is that you're erecting up a new unit or adding up machineries. You just bring on to your site do all the cablings, whatever that is needed, and disconnect it with the mains. But what you don't look at actually is the accessibility of all these, the electrical mains at these places. And in the industry you're talking about, when you say there is a lot of fluff, there is a lot of humidity within the the places like the rings, especially in the ring spinning, you need to have, and some of the sizing and the warping areas, you need a high level of the humidity. On top of that, you have this huge amount of fluff. You have the whole machine running perfectly fine, but what you don't see is that how that electrical socket has behaved over time, where you have plugged in that machinery. Have you ever looked into that? Have you ever done any kind of thermography, or have you ever seen that the connections are spliced up just to continue your operations? So there has to be a lot of effort, not only in the maintenance, but also to very regularly see that what could be done to not only to maintain the overall the smooth operations, but also to see the tendency of the people utilizing this workspace. In countries like ours, they have a huge mobile penetration, the cell phones penetration. If you're talking about 230 million odd people, we have 40 million connections or 45 million connections. All this workforce which comes to our places for work, where would they charge all their cell phones? Obviously within the same space. And at times when you provide them with all sorts of the facility in terms of the electrical sockets and the extension boards and whatnot, they keep on charging the phone. Sometimes the spliced up wiring, sometimes they keep on changing and those the connections without the shoe plugs to the cell phones. And the batteries, the lithium batteries you are using there most of the time, you see they explode up while charging, if kept there for longer amount of time. So yes, electrical hazard is perhaps the biggest hazard, but then you have to have the whole situation there being monitored as to how you can address on a day-to-day basis, and to see that how do you see the people coming in and utilizing this workspace.
Yeah, thank you. In fact, just as an add-on to all the expert panelists, because there are few industry captains also in the participation, one thing I have always observed is the last man procedure. This is lacking because the entire training process, the rigors of all the maintenance and everything is done up to the foreman level on a continuous basis. All managers, foremans, they know all the procedures. But who is the guy who is acting? This is very important. I think every time there is a loss, that is because the watchman does not know what to do.
Exactly.
The machinist does not know what to do. So the last man and the last mile procedure has always, especially in UAE, now we are talking about all this as a part of the clauses and conditions now. That the last man has to be trained periodically. Like all the panelists, they came up with the mock drills and the trainings. So every last man has to be trained, and this also has to become a part of the HSC program. Like who has to do what at the time of a accident. Like he need not stay there. But suppose if somebody has to call the police, he has to just call the police and move out. Somebody has to call the civil defense, he has to just call the civil defense and move out. So this sort of procedure is very important. And then companies should have a very good business continuity plans. And what I see most important is the cooling period. Some of the factories definitely have 24-hour shifts. So cooling period may not immediately come to apply. I saw Faisal's one example where there's a welding going on. You said there is no fire extinguisher seen anywhere. But there is also one more factor. Once you finish the welding, after half an hour or 45 minutes, somebody has to go and see the welded part has cooled down. Because there is a continuous activity in the factory, these are the places where the fire is going to start. and it's very easy. Then in UAE, there's a lot of discount when we're talking about auto dealers to police, auto dealers to civil defense. These are now mandatory, like smoke detectors. All this have become like integral part of what Mr. George said. If you have sprinkler installations, so much of losses can be contained. And in fact, yesterday when Mr. George was talking to us, he said even the salvage has a value. So if we have sprinklers, the salvage would have fetched some value to us. I have two questions from one from Tamur Beg and one from Rohban Ahmed. So I just thought, let me give them with a live example. This is what I did when I was in the underwriting in India. This is a typical tobacco ban, nothing connected to the textile industry, but very much similar to what we're discussing. A tobacco ban is where the tobacco leaves are heated or conditioned to a certain temperature. It's a constant temperature so that all the tobacco leaves have similar color and finish and crispiness. So what happens in a tobacco ban is a slight, like we have fluff in fluff in cotton industries, a small tobacco piece which gets dried and falls on this tube is a total loss. So if you see the tobacco leaves are hanging and the tube are red hot because they are blowing fire into that tubes to make a constant temperature in the room. So what I suggested was to put a thin mesh between the tube and the tobacco leaves. And then we saw I was there in that area for 2 years. I saw there's a drastic reduction of claims to almost like 20% of what claims we used to have. We saw only 20% claims. So there was a reduction of 80% losses in that region. And this doesn't cost much money, like how Faisal put it. It doesn't cost money really. Like Ashton said, now all things are coming at 1/3 the cost of what it used to be before. So it's just our effort which will safeguard the country's precious money and also the industry. I have a lot of questions, but I think we are running out of time. Should we take few, Shamsab?
I think we can take one last question and then we can wrap up.
Okay, fine. So Taimur Beg has a question. Client says if we have done all the precautions, then why we take insurance? This is what we have to hear from risk managers. Should the government also intervene in this matter? Anybody can take the question. One of the
question.
panelists.
I think this is one of a common question which any client would raise with any of the adjuster or the insurer. I think insurance are basically here to cover accidents and any negligence can be ignored, but accidents are predominantly covered. So accidents can happen anytime, and nevertheless, that all risk management, everything has been done. Accidents can even occur. So I think it is more essential to have insurance as a protection. It is nothing that we have everything done and say okay, but tomorrow if there's a loss and it's the owner who's going to get suffered. So where they have a protection, insurance basically it's a protection given to any sort of an industrialist or any business owner. So piece of sleep at night.
Fine. I think in fact this particular session needs a lot of time because one is it is a hot topic and it is a concurrent topic, and if you go by the statistics what Faisal showed, this is a major industry in the market for Pakistan. So protection of the industry, protection of the men material, and protection of our exchequer money is very important. And I would like to wrap up this session with special thanks to Mr. George Lobo, very senior and very seasoned, experienced surveyor. And thank you, sir, for being on our panel.
You're welcome.
Oh, thank you,
Anytime.
sir. Mr. Faisal, you have been like those on the last presentation, but it was, I think, very effective on the pictorial side. It stuck to everybody's mind. Thank you so much for being on the panel.
Thank
Shri
you.
Mahesh, you are a friend and a thought partner to us. Thank you so much for being on
Thank
the
you.
panel and
Thank you.
great presentation. Thank you. Ashton, I think this live claim was like an eye opener because there are a lot of facts and we have the ground realities of how the claim was handled, how it was settled. So thank you so much for being on panel. And I thank Zulfikar, I thank Hisham, I thank Usman Saab and Zoeb Saab for all the support, technical support on the background. And I thank all the participants. Thank you so much. It was one of the best represented presentation this time for the many webinars which we have done earlier. And it was live on Facebook as well. We'll call an end to the session. Zulfikar Saab, just a word from your side before we close.
Yeah. I need to say 2 or 3 things. One thing is that we're going to post that webinar on our YouTube channel as well. That will be available to other people who couldn't participate. And I want to just brief it out that the gist of risk management is housekeeping, maintenance, and training. If we focus on these 3 things, which I have learned from today's session, then hopefully it's not that difficult for the industrialist and other people.
Yeah, truly. In fact, we will be using our panelists for future as well. Thank you so much for the cooperation. Hisham Saab,
Thank you.
Being the LII's representatives, please, you can close the session with your last word.
Thank you very much, everyone. It was indeed a great session, and I think a lot of things to learn from this for us as industry. As one of the questions that I just saw was emphasizing on that how IAP or the insurance associations of every country should work. So I think it is a responsibility of industry as well to work in collaboration with clients, to educate them, and not only through these webinars, but also to do some practical steps. As we saw that in UAE, we learned that you have put some good warranties, which are usually part of the risk survey reports, and they never become part of the policies. So I think these are the learnings that this forum is bringing up for all of us. And I think Faisal, being the chair of IAP Pakistan Property Committee, can take this forward. And also, I'm grateful to the people from the textile sector who attended today's session. It's a mutual learning. The only purpose of holding this session was to tell everyone that risk management is as important as the insurance itself. So insurance, as we always say, should always be taken as second line of defense and not the first line of defense. So the first line of defense has to be very, very strong. And I think today we learned many new things, many new ideas. George Saab, idea of putting sprinklers in the godowns where the maximum risk is there, I think, and many other ideas which probably would help in bringing the risk to a better quality. So I think thank you everyone once again from IAP North and Lahore Insurance Institute and IGIP. Thank you to Zulfikar and Usman in particular, and all our distinguished panelists. We hope to bring such webinars frequently to you, and hopefully we'll be doing another by end of July. So thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
just as a last word to the participants, thank you so much again and again. And our Usman Saab will be sending you the presentation copies plus the e-certificate of attendance. And I wish you all a very happy evening. And let's take control of our countries by giving them the best insurance support. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.